Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Pillow, Woven, and Hover. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We've had a big week. We've been talking a lot, you and I, doing podcasts, making plans, and we started a mini series last week all about workflows revisited, and we were doing this because it's that time of the year when you and I start tearing down our systems and examining them and deciding what needs fixing, what needs changing, and what needs to be, moved into the future in some respect. And we've been doing that more this year, I think, than we have in really any year past, at least that you and I have been working together. And yet last week we talked about email. And this week we're going to talk about note-taking, which is going to be pretty good.
Yes, we're going to talk about all the changes that we're making to our note-taking workflow, and specifically all the apps that we tested again, the system that we used to have before, and the new one that we are using now, which is, I think we suggested this before, we're using Craft. And I personally have gone very deep in Craft over the past few weeks, both for personal usage and professional usage for MacStories as a company, and for collaboration with you and with Alex, and all the things that we're doing and planning for MacStories in 2021. Today, we are going to talk about our personal usage of Craft for our own note-taking, but we have more coming, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What we thought we would do is, because these topics are so broad and so deep, we thought today we'd really focus on our personal use of Craft, and then on MacStories Unplugged later in the week, we'll dive into how we're using it more collaboratively for the projects that we do at MacStories. So we'll have that. That's going to come out later in the week. The MacStories Unplugged is an exclusive podcast for Club MacStories members. You can join the club at club.macstories.net, and part of that is you'll get the podcast. So that will be out on Friday, but for today, we will focus on our personal use. Now, this app, Craft, I actually think I started using this before you, Federico. I started right around the time at WWDC. I got on the beta.
That is true.
And I was not super impressed early on because at the time, and, I'm talking about an early beta here. I'm not talking about what the app is today, which is much more impressive and something that I really like. But at the time, it felt like a watered-down version of Notion because it's this block-based note-taking app that lets you link between notes, and it has that structured feel to it that Notion has, in that every single paragraph is its own block, which means that you can kind of drag those blocks around to reorder things, easily indent them. Like you can select a whole bunch of blocks, hit tab once, and it just indents all of them by one, that kind of thing, which isn't how a normal text editor works. And it does take a little bit of getting used to, but this app has evolved incredibly rapidly over the course of the summer. And I guess it was right around September, October when I really started diving into it a little bit more, because I realized that not only is it a really great app on iOS, but, and this is actually far too rare, it's excellent on all the platforms. It's excellent on the Mac as well.
Yeah, it's I mentioned this before, how this is one of my favorite new apps of 2020, and I got on the Craft beta train relatively late, and I remember installing the beta at some point in the summer, but as usual, as with all things that I do in the summer, I was really busy. I didn't really pay attention to it, but I signed up for the mailing list, so I kept receiving updates because I was intrigued by the idea of having some of those features reminiscent of Notion. So, being able to type a slash and then getting access to all of these different blocks within your text editor. I was intrigued by it, and I just felt like, I want to keep an eye on this. And what pulled me back in was when, a few weeks before their public launch, they added a feature that is often requested by folks who are into the idea of note-taking based on the Zettelkasten approach.
Mm-hmm.
So for those not aware, the Zettelkasten note-taking method is essentially an approach built around the workflow of a highly productive professor and social scientist from Germany by the name of Niklas Luhmann. He published something like 50 books in his lifetime and over 600 articles. He was a very productive individual, very productive person. And he was able to do this because he came up with this note-taking system based on, so Zettelkasten in German, I believe it means the sleep box. And he basically organized his notes as these little pieces of paper organized in this sort of a like very involved drawer to like a shelf. And basically his approach was that each little piece of paper contained a single idea. And all of these single ideas, the whole sleep box system is predicated upon the ability to reference each idea and to find connections between them. And that was a physical system. It was a physical workflow based on actual paper and actually moving these ideas around, visualizing them on a desk, finding connections between them, and being able to reference them by a date and an ID. And he was doing all of this manually decades ago. Now, over the years, a bunch of systems have come up that allow you to structure your note-taking and your research based on this approach. And it seems to me as if the Zettelkasten method, it became popular again in 2020, which doesn't really surprise me because a lot of people are spending time at home. They have more time for reading. They have more time for research. And it's not really that surprising that people are spending more time rethinking their workflows in 2020, which to an extent is also what we are doing. And over the past few months, I have seen, I should say that I've been lurking in the Zettelkasten community on Reddit also. It's a very interesting place. But I've seen a bunch of products that have come up over the past year that try to find the digital version of Zettelkasten. Some people use Notion for it. Other people, lots of people, use Roam. Roam Research is another popular service that is based on this idea of like you can create all these separate notes and everything is linkable and you can cross-reference all of your notes. But also, for example, CGP Grey and Mike Hurley talked about this on Cortex a few months ago, how Grey is using this app for Mac called Obsidian. And Obsidian is another of this genre of apps where you can create lots of notes, store them in a folder as markdown files, and then you can create links between them. And you can search and you can create all these cross references between them. So I'm very interested in this field. I've been doing lots of reading about it. And all of this to say that a few weeks before their public launch, Kraft came out with this feature called backlinks. So backlinks are part of something else that you may be familiar with, which is the ability to link to another note. It's usually called a wiki link. If you ever used something like Bear, for example, you know how in Bear, which is another note-taking app that some people do use for Zettelkasten, by the way. But in Bear, you can type a double square bracket and it starts a search for other notes that you store in Bear. And you can create a link to another note within a note. So let's say that you're working in a note called scratchpad.txt and you want to create a link to another note called agenda. And you can create a reference between them. And so from your Scratchpad note, you can just click it and you're taken to a different note in the same application. It's a very handy feature if you want to structure multiple notes and sort of have a navigation tool built in, right?
Right.
But what the Zettelkasten people want is the next step of this, which is if you're going to reference notes in a digital system, wouldn't it be great if, in addition to linking to something else, that something else is also aware of the fact that another note is linking to it? This is what it's called a backlink. So it's not just that you can type a double square bracket and you're linking to another note, but when you arrive in that other note, At the bottom of it, you see a little section that says, oh, hey, look, scratchpad.txt is linking to this note. And this is exactly what Craft added. In addition to being able to reference another note by typing a so-called wiki-style link, you can type it by doing a double square bracket or by just typing the @ character. When you land in that referenced note, at the bottom of it, you will see a section that says links to this page. And if you expand it, you will see all of the notes that are linking to the current note. It's probably more convoluted and complex to explain on a podcast than it is to actually see it in practice, but it's really well done. And all this to say, that specific functionality was what pulled me back into Craft.
Yeah, I think of it a little bit of in the sense that you're essentially building web pages, and you've got your typical HTML links from one page to another. And instead of using like a back button, you've got references at the bottom, which are a little bit, they operate almost like footnotes, I suppose. Like in Markdown, when you go to a footnote and you go down to the bottom of the document and read the footnote, and then you can click on the number and go back up to where you started. It works a little bit like that.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. Getting a good night's sleep is underrated, but with a little help, it can be life-changing. Pillow is an all-in-one sleep tracking solution to help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and discover what might be affecting your sleep quality. It's easy to fall into bad sleep habits, but with Pillow, you can get back on track. If you have an Apple Watch, tracking your sleep is as easy as wearing your Apple Watch during sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically. One of Pillow's most beloved features is the ability to get a detailed heart rate diagram of every sleep session. You can even compare your sleep quality with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and many more health metrics to discover how they might be affecting your sleep. Pillow can optionally record sounds you make during sleep too. From sleep talking to sleep apnea and snoring or unexpected noises during the night that might be affecting your sleep, a lot of users have been surprised by the results. Pillow is also very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. Pillow doesn't have user accounts, so you can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Naps boost your focus, creativity, and overall well-being, too. If you're working from home, give Pillow's Power Nap feature a try. If you need an alarm, Pillow can wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad. If you have WatchOS 6 or newer installed on your Apple Watch, the latest update of Pillow uses the new extended runtime to minimize battery consumption on the Apple Watch. Pillow has a new home screen widget that allows you to track your sleep and analyze your daily goals too. Pillow is available on the App Store for the iPhone, Apple Watch, and iPad. Discover all of Pillow's features at pillow.app. Again, that URL is pillow.app. I'll put a link in the show notes too. Pillow, sleeping better made simple. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
Before we talk about what we like personally about Craft, John, I want to hear from you. What was your note-taking setup before using Craft?
Well, and we'll talk about this a little bit more on MacStories Unplugged, but you and I tried in 2019 when I visited you in Rome and we were doing planning for 2020. We tried Notion and it didn't work out. And it didn't work out primarily because, at least I found, at some point we wanted to get the information out of there, out of Notion and into another document. And it was really hard. It was kind of an Evernote type of experience in terms of getting it out. And on top of that, it doesn't behave the way you would expect on iOS. There's a lot of clunkiness there that I think is partly because its origins are as a web app. And if you use it on the web and it's great that you can use it in any web browser. That is terrific, but it doesn't translate super well to iOS in particular. Now, for me personally, and so we did that. We tried that. That was a year ago. That was December 2019. And we decided that's not for us. That Notion document still exists out there for reference because it was so hard to get stuff out of it, but we're not using it actively. So I went back to using Notes, Apple Notes, because it's a good app. It's got a lot of features that I like. I really like the rich previews for things like links. I like that you can pin notes to the top. I also like that you can share notes and share folders with people. And you and I have a folder of shared notes that, I don't know, we have maybe 20, 25 in there, which is, though, also part of the problem why we've started moving to Craft, is that notes, I think, gets a little cumbersome if you have a lot in it. And we had a lot of shared notes, and it was starting to get difficult to track them, especially since there was no, like, if I would have to tell you, Federico, I made a change to this particular note, because since we have a shared folder, I can't reshare the link to a particular note to you. It only shares the shared folder link again with you. Now, you might have notifications turned on, so you see that I made a change somewhere, but I can't really rely on that because those are kind of ephemeral anyway, and I suspect you probably have those turned off anyhow. So I use notes, but the system was starting to break down, especially when you and I would do a bigger project and we would try to cram everything in there, because what would invariably happen is that some things we were working on, we would kind of resolve, but we wouldn't want to really get rid of that text. We might need to refer to it again later. It might be some aspect of a project was completed, but we might need that information for some further aspect of the project. So we didn't want to get rid of it, but the note just kept growing and it became more difficult to find things in it. And you'd have to kind of, do you put the new stuff at the top? Do you put the new stuff at the bottom? Do you create it more like an organized outline? It can get messy pretty fast, which is, I think, why we started both gravitating towards Craft, especially for stuff for collaborative projects. I started using it in this fall, as I said, because I was feeling this tension with using Apple Notes, and I wanted to see if this was going to be a good way to store things like lists that I keep, whether that's lists of ideas of things to write about, research notes for apps, that sort of thing. And that, so far, we can get into the details in a little bit, but it's been working really well for me. I've really liked it a lot more than using notes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good description of the limitations of Apple Notes. I've also, obviously over the years, I've tried all kinds of different note-taking apps. I used to use, many, many years ago, I used to be an Evernote user. And then I switched to Bear, and then I switched to Apple Notes. And then from Apple Notes, I went back to Bear. And I considered all kinds of note-taking apps and systems and services over the years. But ultimately, I just stuck with Apple Notes because it was reliable, it was free, and it always supported the latest system technologies.
Yeah. I should mention, too, that for a while I tried using Ulysses for note-taking.
Yeah, some people do that. Yeah.
And they do. And because you can have, different folders and different sheets. And I realized very quickly with that was not for me, because I have enough documents that are for things that we're going to publish in my text editor already. And at the time I was using Ulysses, and it was just way too much in one place. And I decided, even though I could keep it in a separate folder, I wanted to keep my note-taking completely separate from my actual, published writing.
Yeah. What I heard some people do, Obsidian users who are into Zettelkasten, they create a folder full of markdown files so that when they're on their Mac, they can use Obsidian. But this folder, they store it in Dropbox so that on iPhone and iPad, where Obsidian doesn't have a native app. And by the way, I would love to check out Obsidian with a native app on iPad, but it doesn't exist. But what they do is they access that folder using OneWriter, which is a text editor. But because it supports, I guess, clickable hashtags and wiki links, and you can point it to a Dropbox folder, I guess people are using it that way.
That's interesting. That's the first text editor I used when I first started writing at MacStories.
Yeah, I used to use it years ago. In any case, I used to be an Apple Notes user because it was the best option for me, and it was reliable and fast, and I liked the simple design. And there's also some features that I appreciated of Apple Notes, such as how you have different keyboard shortcuts for formatting your documents. I like to have headings and subheadings and checklists and bullet lists, that kind of stuff. I like to have rich links However, there's also limitations around those rich links. For example, for some reason, when you paste a link in Apple Notes, which I do a lot, like I work on the web, I copy lots of links for the website, for MacStories. I deal with URLs on a daily basis. But to have a rich link in Apple Notes, for whatever reason, you need to use the extension. If you just hit Command V and you paste it, you don't get a rich link. You get a raw HTTPS URL, which, kind of sucks. So I accepted those limitations, but overall, like, the formatting tools were fine. And I got by relatively okay using Apple Notes. But the problem with Apple Notes is exactly what you mentioned. The moment that you're working on a big project and that project scales to have lots of different notes, it becomes kind of hard to link it all together. And look, you know me, I came up with a bunch of workarounds to create those links between notes. I have a shortcut. I believe it's on MacStories or it's in Club MacStories. I don't remember right now. That I found a workaround to get the unique URL scheme of a specific note in Apple Notes. And so I came up with a system to create my own table of contents for, like, when I was working on the iOS review, I stored all of my notes and all of my research in Apple Notes. And I came up with a workaround on how to create a table of contents based on that URL scheme. But everything was a workaround. And the system, you could tell that it wasn't really built for that.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Woven, the all-in-one calendar perfect for busy people. I've been tearing down a lot of old systems and building them back up, trying new things, whether it's email or calendaring. And one of the things I've been looking at is Woven, because you know what? Having a calendar that works for you and works the way you work is a great way to avoid feeling overwhelmed and disorganized. It's perfect for getting on top of your day. What's neat about Woven is that it syncs all of your calendars in just one place, including your Google, G Suite, and Microsoft 365 accounts. So you can see all of your time, both personal and professional, in one place. Woven builds scheduling links directly into your calendar so you can use one-off scheduling links, and you can quickly time block your week using Woven's smart templates so you can plan your perfect week. Woven also has built-in analytics so you can easily calculate where you spend your time so you can make more time for what matters the most. You really need to check this out. Take control of your calendar and improve your workflow. And as a listener of this show, you can try Woven for free for 21 days. Just go to woven.com or click the link in the show notes. Again, that's woven.com. Our thanks to Woven for their support of App Stories.
It's from that kind of mindset that I approached Craft, of like, here's this tool where it was built for people like me, where you can create multiple notes and it doesn't punish you for it. You can link everything together very easily. It just takes a couple of keystrokes to create a link between two separate notes or between dozens of different notes. And you have a link, you want to paste that link, you just hit Command V and it becomes a rich link. But it's not just that. You have multiple style options. It's like, do you want to make it a big link or a small link or a medium one? And you can choose. And anything can be formatted the way you want, right? And you can write in Markdown, and that becomes rich text. But also you can have plain text blocks, and you can have code blocks. But really, what sold it for me, and I wish I had this back in June when I started my iOS 14 review, and which is why, by the way, I really hope this product sticks around because I want to use it in the future for the next iOS review. But what I can do here is I can create a folder for any project that I'm working on, and I can start writing. And then if I want to create a separate note for something else that I'm thinking about, I can create a note. But then if I want to have a connection between them, I can create a link. Or something that Apple Notes doesn't offer, which I absolutely love about Craft, and which I'm using a lot, is the idea of creating pages within pages. So in Craft, when you create a note, you can add a title, right? And then you can start adding whatever block you want. It can be a text, it can be an image, it can be a link, whatever. Unfortunately, right now, Craft doesn't have tables, which is one of the things that people really love about Notion, but I think the developers are working on it. Anyway, you can just keep writing and adding links and media, whatever. But then if you realize, well, I'm in this note, I don't really want to create a separate one. However, I want to have a section in here, but I don't want that section to be visible at all times.
Right.
In Craft, you can create a page, which is literally like a little page that you create, and then you can click it and you navigate into that page. And in that page, you can enter whatever you want because it's actually like its own note, but it lives as a page within a page.
Right. So, yeah, from an organizational standpoint, it's very unique, and it's a little hard to get your head around initially, I think, because Craft has the concept of spaces, right? And I have a personal space, you have a personal space, and then we have a shared space where we have shared notes. And then notes can be organized into folders, and then notes themselves can have pages embedded in them, which is what you're talking about. And I guess maybe one of the nice analogs to this is think of it as like a mind map node that's been collapsed. You don't want to see that information anymore at the moment, but with a click, you can always get to it. And that's what but the flexibility of it is that it has all the same attributes as a full note. You're open, but when you go back to your all documents view or your folder view, whatever view that houses your notes, you're not going to see that page. It's only going to be visible if you're in that particular note and you click on it, then you go straight into it.
Perfect description. Yes, that's exactly like you need to make a judgment call when you're working on your notes. You should be like, do I want this to be a separate note, which means it's going to be visible in my all documents view, or it's going to be something that I can save in a folder, or is this a section of a note that I'm working on that I want to be in here, however I want it to be collapsed, and so I need to click on it if I want to see it. And I'm going to give you a practical example before I talk about my next favorite feature of Craft. We do a show called MacStories Unwind, where we recap the week at MacStories on, we cover what we produce for Clap MacStories, and we also have media picks to unwind for the weekend, and those can be music, movies, video games, books, whatever. In my personal Craft workspace, I created a folder for Unwind, and I created 3 separate notes: book picks, video game picks, and music picks. These are 3 separate notes for things that I usually recommend on Unwind. But then I created a separate note, which I marked as a favorite, so it ends up in my starred view in the Craft sidebar. And that note is called Unwind Picks. And it essentially serves as a table of contents because it contains 3 clickable links: music picks, book picks, and video game picks. So I was able to have this separate note that I can save in my starred documents that lets me jump into the kind of pick that I want to manage, that I want to save for Unwind. However, within those 3 separate notes, I have pages for all the kinds of picks that I'm thinking about. For example, right now in my music picks, for the past few days, I've been enjoying the new album by The Struts and the new EP by Get Cape, Work Cape, Fly, and the new album by Miley Cyrus. And all of these are pages that I can click on to see additional details and links that I've saved about that album, such as maybe I have an interview that I want to mention on Unwind. So instead of occupying all the space in that note, these are pages, and I can just click on them. They are collapsed by default, and then I can find all the things that I want to save around them. So this is to give you an idea of this is the kind of structure that you can have in Craft. You have tons of freedom when it comes to making a decision around, should this be like a note that just contains everything visible at all times? Should this be a separate note, which means I can create a link between multiple notes? Or should this content be like a section, which means like a page? And then, of course, you have multiple style options to choose from. Incredible flexibility, really, when it comes to structuring your thoughts, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what's interesting about it, too, is that you don't have to make these decisions up front necessarily because it's so easy to change it, right? As you said, if you're working on a note and all of a sudden, I just wrote 250 words about something that I really don't need to see all the time, you can very easily collapse that into its own page.
Yeah, absolutely. And And the feature that I mentioned, like the wiki links and the automatic backlinks, those are
Right.
live links, which means if you change the title of a note that you link to, that link will automatically update to use the new title. You will not break that link. It
Right.
updates for you. So it's even smart in that way.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Hover. When you have that one big idea, where do you go? Well, your business starts with a domain name. So for many entrepreneurs, Hover is that first big leap. I've been using Hover for years. I think it's been like 7 or 8 years at this point for all sorts of domains, whether it's my own personal johnvorhees.net account or my kids' accounts or my business account. I've used it for all those things. And what I like about it is that it's simple to sign up, easy to manage, and affordable. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from. No matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it. And they have excellent technical support to answer any questions you might have. And they're dedicated to getting you online, not upselling you. .inc is a new premium domain extension for businesses that want to be taken seriously. Have you checked if your brand name is currently available? Don't let someone else beat you to your brand's .inc domain. From small startups to large enterprises, brands are taking notice of the credibility of the .inc domain. Over 56% of Forbes' most valuable brands are registering their brand names, including PayPal, Facebook, Fox, Amazon, and Walmart. Hover has free Whois privacy so the bad guys can't get your information, a clean UX and UI, monthly sales on popular top-level domains. It's easy to see why Hover is the popular choice for people starting a business. Millions of company names end with "inc." Now your domain name can too. Upgrade your domain to the perfect match. Join over 56% of Forbes' most valuable brands and register your .inc domain today. Go to hover.com/appstories and get a 10% discount on all new purchases. That URL one more time is hover.com/appstories. Make a name for yourself with Hover. Our thanks to Hover for their support of the show.
All of this, in my opinion, comes together in how you can search for anything in craft. You can search for any kind of content. You can search for any title, any page, any note, any section, any paragraph. Like any block of content in craft can be searched and can be reopened directly. You can do this with the quick open feature, which you can access with Command-Shift-O. It's the same in a nice touch. It's the same keyboard shortcut of the quick open mode in IA Writer. So it clicked immediately for me. Command-Shift-O. Right. And this is basically universal search for anything. As I mentioned, you can open notes, and it's really fast, right? You can open notes, you can open pages, you can open sections, you can jump to specific lines of text. If you type the words of a paragraph, it's amazingly well done, and it works both on the Mac and iPhone and iPad. It works everywhere. And to me, this is really the glue that brings it all together. If I'm in a note and I want to switch to another one, and I don't have a link to it, I can just search for it and jump there. And then when I want to go back, I can just search again or enter a link, click it, and go back. It's like this, all of this, when you consider it all together, the speed. We were talking about this privately, John and I, yesterday. The speed with which you can format a document in Craft and give it multiple sections, create pages, create links, and give it a structure is, it's like incredible. Like I was able, like John and I were exchanging some ideas for MacStories yesterday, and I started outlining them, and within 2 minutes we had like this
Right.
full document full of multiple sections and links and pages, something that would have been impossible to do in Apple Notes, or if we wanted to do it, it would have been nearly not as powerful or not as elegant.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I've been using it for a lot of interesting things too. I mean, I've got and the other thing I guess I should mention too is that on the Mac, you have kind of a breadcrumb trail where if you open a bunch of different notes, they all open in their own tab. And so and you can have tabs open from across multiple spaces. So right now I've got tabs open for the show that we're doing right now, which is in our shared space, as well as some of the some of the documents in my personal space as well. And so I keep things in here, like I have kind of a running list of things that you and I need to talk about. If I'm in the middle of something and I don't want to interrupt what I'm doing or interrupt you, that I keep a list of there. I have a scratch pad, which is really where I use the extension on iOS a lot to dump things into, whether it's a link from Twitter or an article I want to read or an app I want to check out. It really could be just about anything, a little bit of text. One thing I've been doing with some of my sponsorship work for advertising is experimenting with keeping one single document that has very basic information about the people I'm talking to at any given moment, like, a developer's name, the app that they make, and their email address. And then I use the Pages feature to have more details about that, like, what we're talking about and that sort of thing. It's almost like its own little CRM, as they say, and writing ideas, lists like that, app notes that I'm taking for research for reviews that I'm working on. It can be just about anything. And because it's very easy to drag in images, screenshots that you've taken, or to paste in the links, it just works incredibly well to get it all formatted neatly and tidily, and to find things again, because the search is really powerful too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I guess I want to mention before we wrap up the show is how, more broadly speaking, this flexibility that I now have with my note taking has gone hand in hand with the fact that I've been doing lots of reading and lots of research, sort of like trying to internalize, if you will, a different way to structure and to save my thoughts and to archive them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing a lot of reading, as I mentioned. I've been, lurking in some Zettelkasten communities, but also I've been there's this really good introduction to the Zettelkasten method on the I don't know if this is like an official website or what. It's zettelkasten.de/introduction. It's really well done.
Oh, okay.
It's really well written. It's got a table of contents and everything. And I've been reading this book. I think I mentioned it on Unwind by Sonki Arens, called How to Take Smart Notes. But also, like, there's this incredible it's like an open notebook by Andy Matushak. I hope I didn't get their name wrong.
I think you got the name right.
Yeah, they used to work at Apple on the iOS team, and Andy does a lot of interesting work and public research around this idea of tools for thought. And there's this open notebook on Andy's website where you can basically see all the notes that Andy took. Like it's called Andy's Working Notes on all kinds of topics, on all kinds of research. And I've been clicking around, and it's really like this concept of multiple notes that reference each other. It's really amazingly well done. And what I stole from Andy, in a way, it's sort of adapted to my habits, is this idea of the what's top of mind. Andy has this note called What's Top of Mind, that it's described as sort of like a now page, but with a broader time horizon and focused on what I'm thinking about. And as soon as I saw this, I knew that this was something that I've always been doing myself without probably even being conscious of it, without actually acknowledging it, in terms of like, I've always tried to save like things that I'm thinking about before they become tasks in my task manager. Like there's some things that maybe the correct word is exploring, those thoughts that before they become actual and actionable items in my to-do app, they're more like things on my mind that I'm thinking about. And I've always felt like without a proper place to save them and to structure them, I keep them in my brain. And by keeping them in my brain, I feel physically bad over time, because I feel
it's a lot to carry around.
It's a lot to carry around, and I forget about things, and then I feel better because I forget about things. And it's like, but I don't want to give them like a due date. I don't want to save them in the inbox of my task manager. And so the scratchpad note that I've been keeping for years was exactly that. but it didn't have the structure. It didn't have the powerful tools of a note-taking app like Craft. And so now, for the past few weeks, I've been using this note called Dashboard, which is basically based on the same idea of the what's top of mind page. It's like, these are all just the things that I'm thinking about right now. And they're not necessarily to-dos. They're not necessarily actionable items that can be given a due date or that can be given a project. These are more like general things. Some of them, I then realize, oh, this can actually be a task. And so I take it out from the dashboard note and I put it in my task manager and I give it a date. But just a place to store things that come and go, things that I'm thinking about, that I want to do something about, but without the, I guess, the fixed format of a task manager. It's more like a free-form representation, like a free-form digital representation of my brain on any given moment.
Well, boy, that sounds scary.
No, but it's really like, I make it sound fancy, right? But it's just literally just a note with a bunch of lines of text.
I understand. Yeah,
but then it's a jumping point, right? Because from there, you can decide, oh, this can actually be its own note. So I want to make it or maybe I want to make it a page, right? It's all in the having the freedom to let your thoughts evolve and become something else, which I think Craft is something that makes it really easy to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I've kind of watched you as we've worked on some projects together over the past week, doing just that in real time, and we'll talk more on Unplugged about those collaboration features. But watching you do it, I get a better sense for what you're trying to do and how you're thinking about it, and it does have the flexibility. The app has the flexibility to allow you to do those things really, really well. Now, of course, there are things we would love to see added to this. I know you mentioned tables already. On the iPad, I really don't like the fact that when I hold down the command button, it tells me to hit command comma in order to get the keyboard shortcuts. And I understand why they're doing that, because they have an awful lot of keyboard shortcuts. They want to create like a tabbed system to review that, but I don't particularly like it myself. I wish there were more ways to sort notes, because when you get a lot of notes in here, now you can create more structure on them. As we've said, it's really flexible. But I'd like to be able to, for instance, if I'm looking at notes in a list view, because there's a bunch of ways you can lay out the notes in the space. If I'm in list view, maybe I want to float all the starred ones to the top, or maybe I want to sort them alphabetically, or I think right now you can do it by, I think it's date modified and maybe date created, I want to say. But yeah, I think it'd be nice if there were more ways to kind of sort and maybe filter some notes at times. But for an app that's only been out for a couple of months, it's really remarkable how good this is. And I can't really underemphasize how important it is and how nice it is to have an app that is so solid on both the iPhone, iPad, and the Mac, because I feel like oftentimes developers start on one platform and the other one gets a little bit shortchanged, at least at first. I mean, there are an awful lot of apps that are good on all platforms, but they rarely start that way with a 1.0. And Craft has really been able to pull it off, which is really neat. So if you want to hear us talk more about the collaboration features and go a little more deeply on some of the work projects we're doing and how we're grappling with larger projects in Craft, check out MacStories Unplugged. Again, that's part of Club MacStories, and you can sign up and join to become a member at club.macstories.net. That, of course, comes with a lot more than just the podcast. There's weekly newsletters and a whole bunch of other perks as well. I should also thank our three sponsors again for today. That's Pillow, Woven, and Hover. And, of course, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is also at Viticci on Twitter and Instagram. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.